On principle, I ought to prefer pop music to classical music, and I did for years. I did because classical music was the conservative music, the music of the affluent classes. Pop music is the music of the working people and the music of rebellion. And also because there's always a snobbery about classical music, a looking down on pop music, and it was always, apart from anything else, slightly unfair, because what they would do is look at whoever was in the charts and say how terrible they were and how trivial it was and how it couldn't stand up to Mozart, and you'd want to respond at the time that when Mozart was writing there must have been hundreds and thousands of composers who were trivial and useless and only interested in how much money they could make in a short period of time, and that compared to Mozart they were no good. But the difference is that Mozart has survived 200 years because he was good, and the music that's good today, the pop music, will survive 200 years. And that's true. And yet, as time went on, I found myself more and more disillusioned with pop music. And what it was that I hated the fact that everybody in the whole pop music business, and not just the promoters, not just the musicians, but the people who work behind the bars, the people who write about it, the people who go and watch it, the people who talk about it, seemed to be interested only in proving how cool they were. The hangers-on, the people who only wanted to be bought another drink by someone else they were hanging on to. The journalists, half of them not only couldn't write a decent sentence but had no interest in writing it because they wanted to prove how clever they were and how blasé and how important. And the fans who picked up a band one moment, put them down the next, who wanted to always be ahead of the game, who would always cite some band you'd never heard of, and then by the time you'd heard of them would say well, they were yesterday's thing and move on to someone else. And the whole thing seemed trivial, and the whole thing seemed to have very little substance. And I'd hate the threatening atmosphere you'd get. You'd walk into some gig or other, and there would be the guy at the door who looked at you as if it was a privilege to let you in. And I don't mean it was their privilege, I mean it was your privilege to be allowed in, because they were so cool and they didn't want to share the same air as you unless they had to. And the bar staff would look at you in much the same way, and you'd feel that, you really ought to be taking money off them rather than being giving it to you. And it would be threatening, and the bouncers would drag people out, and you'd feel the air of a fight all around you. And I started to say, I don't want this anymore. And I started listening to Mozart. And I started listening to Bach. And it's certainly true that if you go and watch classical music, you go to the opera in Oxford, and it's as conservative and unchallenging an audience and as complacent an audience as you could ever wish to find. And that puts you off a bit, and it's, it makes you wish for the rebellion and the fight that's in some pop music. And it's also true that every so often someone crops up in popular music that you think has got something interesting to say, both musically and lyrically. And when Jarvis Cocker popped up and Pulp started making interesting records, and I thought, thank God there's still life left in pop music, and there's still people who want to do what's interesting rather than what's blasé and trivial. And I liked that. But then again, I don't have very much money, and I have to make decisions. And I have to ask myself, do I want to buy a CD and give it a chance and see if it's any good? Or do I want to buy another concerto by Mozart? And on the whole, when you haven't got so much money, and you have to make choices, and you have to decide, is Mozart better than Pulp? Then you're going to go for Mozart. And I can afford one CD every 3 months, and it's always going to be another concerto by Mozart. Ask me in 10 years' time, and in a way I hope I'll have changed my mind, because I don't want to turn into someone who is boring and tedious and conservative and telling you how things were always better 200 years ago. But it's just possible that the music might have been better when Mozart was writing it than when it was appearing on Top of the Pops.